Yeah, no, the fifth inning, the sixth inning, seventh inning, we had pressure on them, and they just made pitches or made plays or, obviously got out of some jams. So
you're just counting outs and knowing that team over there doesn't quit and just trying to make sure that we put our guys in the right spots.
Does it almost feel like this series was destined to go the distance and how close the two teams have played this?
Well, now it does. Now it feels like we need to play 7. I'm glad the series isn't over in their favor.
Never been a part of a Game 7. So this is when you're a young kid and you're kind of trying to play through all the heroes and the heroics and talking about a Game 7 in the World Series, and here we are.
Yes, a series like this deserves a Game 7. SI's prediction from 2014 that the Astros would win the World Series this season, it hangs in the balance, Robin. There's so much at stake.
I mean, really, it would feel like that. As far as bragging rights, that's about as good as it gets.
That's a Ben Reiter and the powers that be at Sports Illustrated dropping the mic here. Of course, the Dodgers rallied against one of the best pitchers in the game, chasing Justin Verlander in the 6th inning in Game 6. Robin, we've seen every type of baseball game in the World Series, from the low-scoring, fast-moving games to the home run derby style games. Which one do you think has been more exciting?
I think it's actually been the quicker, lower scoring games, Game 1 and Game 6 last night, because baseball, we talk about duration a lot. The ones that have been high scoring, of course, go longer. That just makes sense. But it's also about pace as well. These ones are going quickly, and it's a bit counterintuitive because everyone talks about how, appealing the home run is, and I get that. But when it's at its best, playoff baseball is about moments. And the moments lose a little bit of their value. There's a bit of diminishing return when you're seeing home run after home run after home run. It feels less important. Meanwhile, last night, one home run is the difference in the game. It's why in every video game, the power-ups are limited, right? Because if they were plentiful, they wouldn't feel as special. And that's what you see last night in the game. I think the low-scoring games have been far more entertaining than the ones that have even gone to extra innings.
Oh, gonna completely disagree with you on this one. Give me Game 2, give me Game 5 all day long. Yes, you have to
literally all day long.
Literally all day and all night long. But I want 7, 6, and 11. I want 13 to 12 in 10. You mentioned that it's about moments. I think what also makes a World Series special is when it's not about the main guys. We're expecting the starting pitchers to take a lot of the oxygen. We're expecting them to be brilliant. But I love about these games that go long, deep into the night, where bullpens are being taxed, where guys are hitting home runs, is you get the underdog maybe. You get the guy who's not expected to be that World Series hero who comes in these huge moments. That's why we were talking about who is this World Series MVP. There's so many to choose from because you have games like 2 and like 5. And yes, we can talk about juice baseballs and we can talk about what's happening, but I think it adds so much drama and intrigue. And when you have, like you did in Game 5, where you have three-run home runs, I mean, that kind of stuff makes you feel like no matter what kind of lead you have, it's never safe, and you always are waiting for something spectacular to happen.
But it's hard to get to the individual moments in those, because you're going to remember the Turner home run from the beginning of the series, the Peterson one from last night. Those stick out because they're not amongst a barrage of them.
I don't know. I mean, I'm still remembering Puig home runs. I mean, my memory is going back a little bit further than that. I feel like you just got to give me as many fireworks as possible. This season, I feel like deserved it too.
It also shows how good you have to be in these close games. Justin Verlander, a couple of mistakes, can hand him the loss there. To me, this game was decided by the number of runs the Astros left on base. 8 base runners left on. One shouldn't count because Brian McCann is just so slow. I mean, he had to have scored there.
He's an older catcher. Are we really expecting Usain Bolt out of this guy?
I don't like comparing myself to professional athletes. He's a much better baseball player than I am, but I would have scored on that play.
Okay, whatever that's worth.
The Astros had second and third with no outs in the 5th, with the lead and Verlander still on the hill, and they didn't win the game. To me, that's the kind of thing that will lose you a series. What do you think determines this series in Game 7?
As much as you want to think it's starting pitchers, I think it's got to be bullpen, just because we've seen what an impact the bullpen has had. Now, if I am the Astros, you have Will Harris, Brad Peacock, and Chris Davinsky available. They did not pitch in Game 6. Not to mention, it's all hands on deck, so Dallas Keuchel will be in the mix, Charlie Morton will be on the mix, and then on the Dodgers side of things, Clayton Kershaw coming out of the pen. I mean, that's the kind of moment that we want. We saw the magic that happened when Madison Bumgarner came out of the pen for the San Francisco Giants. I feel like this is so amazing. And while we're expecting the starters to be a factor, I think it is going to come down to the bullpen, hands down.
Yu Darvish, to me, is the key. I mean, starting pitching is the obvious answer, right? But his location was off in his first start in this series. You talked about slick baseballs, juice baseballs, what have you.
Sliders.
Sliders, yeah. If his location is off, they could be in big trouble because those runners that were stranded by the Astros may be plated. If he is on, then that big trade deadline move pays huge dividends, and the Dodgers will win the World Series.
Of course, looking forward to tonight. Not that we don't have a rooting interest at all. It's just that SI did predict that the Astros were going to win the World Series 3 years ago, but we don't have a rooting interest.
If you were the one who if you were Ben Reiter, you had made that prediction, would you be rooting for this outcome harder than any other in the history of sports, even your own teams?
Yeah, in the history of life, probably. I mean, you get this and you are prognosticator. They're going to be coming to you for like lottery numbers and just everything, which we'll get from you later, Ben, if you're out there watching. Meanwhile, the newest addition to the SI NFL crew is Connor Orr. He joins us now. He comes to us courtesy of Toyota. Let's go places. Hello, Connor, and welcome to Sports Illustrated. Who's going to win the Super Bowl in the year 2021? I'm just kidding.
Not the Browns.
It's not the Browns, yes. And you can use every football term possible. The Browns fumbled the deal. They botched the snap. They bobbled the ball. They failed to convert, all of that. But the franchise that is synonymous with ineptitude struck again at the deadline, failing to send in the paperwork on a last-minute deal with the Bengals for quarterback A.J. McCarron. Connor, is this mistake going to lead to firings for the Browns and maybe yet another regime change?
Yeah, and I mean, if you even go before the mistake, before, the email error, whatever you want to call it, I mean, they were in the hunt for Jimmy Garoppolo in March. And then, I think the fans of this team are watching him go to San Francisco for a second-round pick. And then all of a sudden, you do get a quarterback, and then, you just don't send in the paperwork. I think it ended up being they expected the Bengals to forward it to the league, and it ended up not happening. But still, I mean, this just shows inexperience, kind of an uncomfortable ineptitude. And, I mean, I would expect some form of a change, whether that's bringing in a more experienced personnel guy or a league office person or something, because you can't make that many mistakes and continue to get away with it.
Meanwhile, a trade that did go through, Kelvin Benjamin from the Panthers to the Bills for a 3rd and 7th round pick. Why the move for Carolina, and how will it change their offense?
I don't think it'll change their offense much because they were due to sort of upgrade their system a little bit anyway. I think when you bring in Christian McCaffrey, you expect to change a little bit of the way you operate. And Kelvin Benjamin, as I wrote yesterday, teams are done kind of waiting around for guys to fulfill their potential. There's so few practice hours in the collective bargaining agreement. If a guy's not reaching his potential under you, you got to get rid of him and you got to maximize your value. So I think that was the thought process there. And he goes to Buffalo where he could have a chance to actually improve their red zone game, which I think they really wanted to do.
Disappointing for them, I suppose. Disappointing for everyone. The New York Giants this year, they suspended cornerback Janoris Jenkins indefinitely for violating team rules. Lots of turmoil with the G-men this season. Is it a certainty Coach Ben McAdoo will be gone at season's end?
I don't think so. I mean, this team is so pragmatic. And you look at the 0-6 season under Tom Coughlin. They waited and they gave him a chance to see what he would do. He ended up finishing that season 7-9 and lasting another year after that. I think beating the Broncos helped when the team was winless. But yeah, I mean, the Giants are also not used to having this many headlines surrounding what's happening to their team. So this is 2 suspensions to 2 of your starting cornerbacks, which is a pretty high profile thing. Seems like the locker room is pushing back a little bit. And, this is new territory for them. I mean, after 11 years with Coughlin, sort of a very military style regime where everyone falls into place, all of a sudden we're seeing a little bit of discord here, which is very different for this team.
Yeah, curious if Ben McAdoo is going to get as long of a leash as Tom Coughlin did, considering he doesn't have the rings that Coughlin was able to bring to the Giants. We love winners and losers, so let's do it. But let's go next level, Connor. We want some under-the-radar winners and losers from the trade deadline. Give us one, a winner and a loser.
Well, I would say if you're looking at losers, maybe Cowboys owner Jerry Jones. Not only is your team struggling, but the Ezekiel Elliott suspension comes down. And then, you watch another team in the division go out and get arguably the best running back that was probably available at the trade deadline. So, yeah, I mean, I think that all things considered, you're probably struggling to come to terms with that. He's a guy that loves to win. He's already kind of fighting this war with the commissioner, and so I have to imagine that this wasn't a very comfortable couple of days for him.
And what about a winner?
Well, I mean, I think you could go a lot of different places. I mean, I really love what John Lynch did in San Francisco. I mean, I think, if you're looking to legitimize yourself, you're coming from television. A lot of people are questioning what you're able to do as a general manager. You breeze through your first draft and do fairly well. And then you go out and you get Jimmy Garoppolo for a second round pick and don't have to commit a long term contract right after the trade. So I think right now, for a guy that a lot of people were questioning, I think he's got to be considered a big winner this weekend.
Who's a team that should have made a move, Connor?
Well, I think definitely the Indianapolis Colts. I mean, this is a team with a lot of expensive veterans that isn't going anywhere this year and isn't going anywhere until Andrew Luck gets back. And so you had Frank Gore there, who I think would have been a great trade chip, somebody that a team needing pass blocking help, a tough runner, a guy that could come in on third downs. Vontae Davis is another guy they could have traded. T.Y. Hilton is another guy they could have traded. All these guys could have contributed. I think could have probably netted a decent amount of return for them, but instead, I think they're just sort of treading water here for the rest of the season.
Thanks, Connor. Appreciate your insight. And of course, the NFL season will continue. We'll get to the college football rankings in just a bit, but the college basketball season is almost upon us. I had a chance to talk about some of the big stories coming up with SI college basketball writer Dan Green. Now I'm joined now by SI college basketball writer Dan Green to go over some of the things for the upcoming season. There are only two returning All-Americans this year, Wisconsin's Ethan Happ and Notre Dame's Bonzi Colson. So are they the favorite for Player of the Year?
Not necessarily. They'll both certainly be in the All-America conversation again, but lots of times National Player of the Year tends to be a little more towards the elite teams, the top teams. So they will both probably be held back a little bit by that. Wisconsin's probably going to take a bit of a step back this year. Notre Dame's good. They'll be a top 15, top 20 team. But you're more likely, I'd say, that the top candidates are more likely to be guys like Miles Bridges, a forward on Michigan State, sophomore, who surprised a lot of people, including his own coach, by returning, and Alonzo Trier from Arizona, who we have as the number one team. He's an elite scorer. He's going to be putting up a lot of big numbers on a top-level team. And then Grayson Allen, who this time a year ago was considered the favorite for the award, had a pretty rough junior season, both health-wise, and he was suspended.
Tripped himself up a little bit there.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. This year, though, he's the lone veteran surrounded by these five-star precocious freshmen. And it seems like he's primed to have a much better senior year than a junior year.
And when you talk about those elite programs, they're generally bringing in big-time freshmen. Who's the freshman to watch this year?
Marvin Bagley III, who surprised a lot of people in August by reclassifying. He had been the number one prospect in the 2018 class. Surprised in August, he decided to enter college this fall, went to Duke. He's one of those long, very modern forwards who can step out and shoot. He can handle the ball. He can play the 3 and 4 spots. He's 6'10". And then a similar guy who had been the number one player in the 2017 class is Michael Porter Jr., who is not going to one of those elite programs. He's going to Missouri, which hasn't won more than 10 games in 3 years. His dad is on the coaching staff there, but he's another one of those players. He's in the conversation for the number one pick next year, along with Bagley in the NBA draft, assuming they both enter. But he can shoot very well for a guy at his size and handle the ball well, and he's someone that I think people are going to find themselves watching Missouri to watch him.
Now, obviously, it was a big story, Rick Pitino no longer being at Louisville. Do you see any other significant impact for this upcoming season as a result of that scandal?
Yes. It would be hard to imagine that nothing else happens in these next 6 months as the season unfolds. As they said at that press conference where the U.S. Attorney announced the charges, they know the playbook. They already have raided some offices of an NBA agent, of some Nike youth offices. And so if Nike schools start getting tangled up in this, if more Adidas schools get tangled up in this because of the evidence that they gather from the people already involved, then we're going to see more charges come out and more information come out, which could lead to suspensions, firings, all sorts of things.
How hard is it to make predictions, set the NCAA tournament field when you know these investigations are still ongoing?
It's very hard. I would liken it to walking into a haunted house where you know things are going to pop out, but you don't know what and you don't know where they're going to come from. And so when you're looking at teams, a team may look great, but you may not know that the FBI is breathing down the neck of some assistant coach who lured some star player there, and they might both suddenly be suspended, or a head coach might go down. And so there's something of an asterisk kind of next to a lot of projections this year, where it's assuming everyone's able to play and eligible to play, and that something massive doesn't derail things that we don't see coming.
Now, one of the things that was just revealed, or at least according to Jim Larrañaga in Miami, that he is coach number 3 in that report. What do we know about that? What more do we need to know?
Coach number 3, so obviously he wasn't charged as a part of this, but he was mentioned in discussions that were recorded as part of this sting operation by the FBI, where executives at Adidas had discussed Coach 3 requesting $150,000 to go to a recruit's family in order for their commitment to play at University 7, which we now know is Miami. And so the player has been identified as Nazir Little, who subsequently committed to North Carolina, which is a Nike school for whatever that's worth. And so what we know is that Jim Larrañaga has said he's Coach 3, but he also denies knowing anything about this. Yet the government has recorded conversations where they specifically talk about this coach requesting this money to go to this player. So either they were making something up when the FBI was listening without them knowing, or his denials are not going to go very far, and there might be more chips to fall in this investigation. So far, it looks like the school is standing by him. It's not a Louisville and Patino situation, but there's likely to be a lot more found out about that, as things proceed.
Looks like the NCAA season will be interesting on and off the court. SI college basketball writer Dan Green, thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
The first college football playoff rankings were released on Tuesday night. We're looking at some playoff resumes, and it starts with the team on top, the resume at the top of the pile. Pete Mundo is here to help us out. We're talking about Georgia. Pete, let's take a look at their resume, and let's be honest, it's very impressive. Not only are they undefeated, but of course outscoring opponents by a huge margin. They had that 28-point win over Mississippi State. The running back duo, have to love it. As you look at the goals coming up, you have Auburn, who is ranked, and then we'll look ahead to potentially the SEC championship game with Alabama. Top 3 in scoring defense, Sony Michel and Nick Chubb, of course, combining for 17 touchdowns. When it comes to references, you only need to ask the Florida and Tennessee fans what that is all about. They won 41-0 over Tennessee, 42-7 over Florida, and Jim McElwain gets fired after that game. Jacob Eason, their sophomore quarterback, watching from the bench as a freshman, and Jake Fromm has had a fantastic season. And of course, Mark Richt, who was the coach at Georgia, could be a reference. He recruited a lot of the upperclassmen. His Miami Hurricanes now at 10th in these rankings, so still have some work to do. Will Georgia, Pete, be one of the 4 resumes when all is said and done?
I think they will be, Maggie. This is a team that you look at that the rest of the way you mentioned some of these tough games coming up. If they get to that SEC title game, which I think they will, they're in a great position to do that right now. If they have a close loss to Alabama, they're in. They have a really strong case. The biggest thing, too, for this Georgia team, keep having the Notre Dame Fighting Irish win the rest of their games. That would be huge. Right now, they have the best win in the country over the number 3 team right now in those polls that we just talked about. So it is looking really good for Georgia. You think about it, they could lose the SEC championship game and still be in. It'd be the first time we'd have 2 teams from the same conference in a college football playoff.
Now, the next resume just outside the pile of the top 4 is Oklahoma. They beat Ohio State head-to-head, so you'd think that gives them the edge there. It did in the rankings. Between the 2 one-loss teams, of course, their one loss comes to now ranked Iowa State. So when you're looking at this resume from Oklahoma, you know their goals are short-term right in front of them the next 2 weeks, Oklahoma State and TCU. They've got a Heisman candidate at QB in Baker Mayfield. Do you think they will eventually make their way into the qualified resumes in the top 4?
If the rest of these top 4 teams win out, Oklahoma's not getting in. That's just the way it's going to play out. Now, we talked about, of course, Georgia, Alabama. If that's a close SEC game, I could see 2 SEC teams getting in. They need Notre Dame to lose a game, or they need Clemson to stumble at some point, because the ACC is viewed as the deepest and strongest conference in America, rightfully so. So the Big 12 needs some help in that top 4. Either Georgia maybe slipping up somewhere in the next month, but still making the SEC championship game, then getting blown out by Alabama. Or even if Alabama loses the SEC title game, they have a pretty weak resume. You look at it, Florida State is no longer a great win, even though Francois was healthy for parts of that game. So there's a lot that can happen, of course, and will happen over this next month. But I think Oklahoma needs a little help, even though their strength of schedule is going to be really good. They play Oklahoma State this weekend and then TCU. Those are 2 great opponents. They can really impress the committee these next couple of weeks.
We know that a Power 5 conference is going to get left out. 5 conferences, 4 slots. Looks like 2, maybe 3 could get left out. Who do you think is in most danger right now?
Pac-12 is in real trouble. The highest ranked team was Washington at 12. I don't like their odds. I mean, find me the path for Washington or any Pac-12 team to get in. They have a lot of teams in that 17 to 25 range. USC's in there, Washington State, Stanford. But I have a very difficult time seeing how, even if Washington runs the table, their non-conference was so weak, it's not going to happen.
What about the Big Ten?
Big Ten's in an interesting spot. They so desperately, the committee won't say it, but I think they really want Ohio State, and they put them in last year. If they win out, that means they would have beaten an undefeated Wisconsin potentially in the Big Ten title game. It'll look good, but if Oklahoma wins out, the head-to-head is all you need to know. The committee's put a lot of importance on that. We saw it last night. That was the biggest question for me. Would Oklahoma be ahead of Ohio State in the first rankings with that head-to-head? They are, so Ohio State's in the position where they've got to get some help from the Big 12, the ACC, and somebody knocking off Notre Dame. One of those 3 things has to happen with Ohio State winning the rest of their games.
I don't know if my first resume looked as good as any of those resumes. No, probably not. Pete Mundo, thank you so much for breaking that all down for us. Of course, Robin and I will be back with you tomorrow, of course, to bring you a big game, a big show on a Thursday. Why not?
Hopefully we don't have to resubmit our resumes between now and then.
After this show, might have to. Thank you so much for watching. Of course, you can be on SI.com and check back all day long for all the latest news and headlines. You can follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live. That's where we post clips from the show. Enjoy Game 7 tonight. Game 7.
This looks pretty cool. I like it.
We'll see you tomorrow.